is Minda Wilson with Urgent Care, and I'm really thrilled to welcome Stephen Schimpff. He's an incredibly knowledgeable person about healthcare and the current environment, and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, and thanks for having me.
So, the landscape for practicing medicine has certainly changed over the last several years. And I just wanted to know what your take is on how the changes in technology and time are affecting the way doctors practice medicine and the way patients need to approach their doctors.
Yeah, well, that's a big question, but let me see if I can break it down a little bit. So I think one of the biggest problems is what I'll call a crisis in primary care. And by that I mean that primary care physicians, and we can go into the reasons why in a moment, aren't able to give patients the amount of time they often need. So we have these 10 to 12 to 15-minute visits, and that's okay for a relatively easy, straightforward problem. But so many times it's not that easy, and especially if it's someone who maybe is a little bit older and has some vision issues or hearing issues or maybe even some cognitive issues, they need more time. And certainly you need more time if you're going to work through some of the anxieties that patients have, if you want to build trust. And of course, that's what we all want to do as physicians.
So what can patients do to sort of help themselves get through to their doctor, in the limited time that they have?
Yeah, so there are two things. I actually want to talk about a prescription for the future, but for the right now, I think the most important thing to do is go in with a list of what your questions are. You know what you want to talk about, and so write it out in priority order. So let's say you have three things that are really important to you, and the first one, you want to talk about the first thing, the most important thing first, because the last thing you want to have happen is, oh gosh, the doctor's standing up, got his or her hand on the door, getting ready to go out, and you then say, but I really wanted to talk about, and now it's too late. So have a list, write your questions out, and I would suggest even write two lists, a copy, and hand it to the doctor when you walk in the door. So I think that can make a big difference. But more importantly, we as patients, and actually as the physicians and nurse practitioners feel the same way, we need more time. So how can you do that? And the insurance isn't going to help. Insurance doesn't pay enough, and doctors' overheads have risen so fast and so much for a whole variety of issues that they have to see many more patients. It's the old thing about try and make it up in volume, and it's just not right. It's just not right. But there are some options, and one is to try and find a primary care physician that does what's called direct primary care. And it has a couple of different connotations, if you will, or variations, probably a better word, where in essence, you pay a fixed fee and you get all the care you need. You're guaranteed that you can call up today and you'll be seen today or certainly tomorrow. You get as much time in the office as necessary. You're given the physicians or the nurse practitioners' personal cell phone that you can call 24/7. You can contact them by email or by text. And it's such a huge difference. It makes all the difference in the world. And of course, you have to pay for it because insurance won't pay for it usually. Sometimes employers will pay for it. But just so I'm not just being Pollyannish here, I will tell you that both my wife and I put our money where our mouth is, and we have, and we use different physicians, but both of them are the direct primary care type physicians. And it makes a huge difference. And here's an example. We got our flu shots last year, but we were just unlucky enough to get the flu anyway. And we both woke up in the morning, and 6 o'clock in the morning, we both looked at each other and said, oh, we know what we've got. And so we each texted our physician, and by 10 o'clock in the morning, we were taking our first dose of the antiviral drug. So it just makes a huge difference. Another time, my wife fell, and she hurt her knee, and She called, and the doc didn't answer right away. It was a Saturday. And the doc didn't answer, but within about 10 minutes, she called back, and she said, I'm really sorry it took me 10 minutes to call back because I was at my kid's birthday party, and I had to just slip out to another room. So it works, and it makes a huge difference, and the care is better. Patients are more satisfied. Doctors burn out less. The total cost of care come down. Then here's why. When you give better care, don't have to send people out to specialists so often. Don't have to do so many tests, because you need both cases because you spend more time talking to the patient. And then people don't end up in the ER as much because they can call it in the middle of the night. There are some networks that are developing. One is called, I won't go into the names of them, but there are a few networks that are developing. But most of these direct primary care type physicians are in practice by themselves or, with 2 or 3 other people. And what you just have to do is go and Google and look for direct primary care, or you can go to a site called, let's see, what's it called? Concierge Medicine Today, and it's an organization in Atlanta that tries to keep track of all the different physicians that are in these types of practices.
For people who live in a place where that's not available to them, I mean, I think there needs to be some kind of banding together of people because, I see the quality of care relative to what I consider the traditional model where you have a relationship with your doctor sort of going away. A doctor spends a few minutes with you if you're lucky. You may see a physician's assistant, someone else other than the doctor comes in and takes your medical history. I mean, these things are changing. So what can we as patients do to sort of work, to what do you see the future being then? Do you see this sort of continuing? And do you see direct primary care really being an option for everyone? I mean, how do you see the future coming about?
Well, I do see it as an option probably not for everyone, but it certainly is an option. And the bottom line is we as individuals have to say what we want. And and we need to say it by telling our elected leaders that this is important, that just sticking with the old insurance models that we have today don't cut it. And but in the end, what we each have to do is take responsibility for our own health, and part of that is taking responsibility for looking for a physician who will give us this type of care. And it's interesting, physicians all want to give this kind of care, but they feel trapped.
Yes.
And they feel that they can't get out. But if they know that there are enough people that are willing and anxious to get this kind of care, well, then they'll switch. They'll switch their practice.
Right.
But physicians are very conservative, and I say conservative, I don't mean Republican, but just conservative in, it may not be working well, but I don't want to rock the boat too much, because this is what I know, this is what I've got. So if their patients say to them, though, hey, listen, this just doesn't work well, they know it too, of course, but if their patients say to them, I'm paying a lot of money through my insurance for not very much, I'd much prefer to just pay you directly and get the time I need. They'll catch on. And, we do it like this way for everything, I don't mean to trivialize it, but, your architect, your accountant, your plumber, your electrician, whatever, you pay them. You pay them for the time and effort they put in. And if you don't like the one you got, you go to another one.
I mean, my mom says that when she was a girl, there was no insurance. You paid doctors a fee, and she actually said it ended up costing less than it does now that she has insurance. But that's
right. See, and when insurance first came out, this was initially, that was after World War II. It was hospitalization insurance, and it was really, for the catastrophic. It wasn't for the minor. It wasn't for the commonplace. And then over the years, the various insurance companies said, well, they were pressured into broadening it and as being more than just catastrophic stuff. And so it became, we're going to basically try and pay for everything out of insurance. Well, that doesn't work because that just really means prepaid care. And so then the insurance companies say, well, we got to cut back. We have to reduce costs because insurance is costing too much. So we're going to pay less. We're going to pay doctors less, hospitals less, and so on. But who gets paid the least? That's the primary care doc or nurse practitioner. And they're the backbone of the system, or they should be. That's what we need. And just to add on here, primary care physicians can take care of probably 95% of the problems that we each encounter. We don't need to be referred very often. But right now, patients get referred frequently simply because the doc ran out of time. Can I tell you a story? Have you got time?
Oh, yeah, please. Go forward.
Well, yeah. So my wife and I were having lunch with another couple one time, and during the course of the conversation, she looked at me and she said, do you know a Dr. So-and-so? I said, no, I don't. She said, well, he's a neurologist, and I need to get an appointment with him, and I can't seem to get one for about a month and a half. So I thought maybe if you knew him, you could get me an early appointment. So I laughed and said, I probably couldn't help you, but I don't know him. So, but then, of course, I said, why? And she said, well, back a couple months ago, I started having this funny sensation. It was like a line from the top of my shoulder straight down across my chest into my abdomen. It was kind of a strange sensation. Sometimes it felt like an electric sort of thing, sometimes like a vibration. So I didn't know what it was, and I didn't think much of it, but it just kept coming and going. And I really got worried. She said, I'm in my 60s, and I thought, could it be my heart or whatever? So I went to see the doctor, and he took a history and did an exam and did an electrocardiogram and said, I can't find anything. And your electrocardiogram's okay, but I know you're worried about your heart. Oh, and by the way, the 12 minutes is up now, okay? So, and says, I know you're anxious about your heart, so why don't we send you to a cardiologist just to be sure? Now, that's not what he should have done. He should have taken another 20 minutes with her and reassured her that she was okay, but he didn't do that. He sent her to the cardiologist. You know what happened. Cardiologist saw her, did a history, did an exam, looked at the cardiograms, everything's fine, but just to be sure, we probably better do a stress test and an echocardiogram. Well, now you can just see the cash register running. It's ringing like crazy. Well, he couldn't find anything, so he said, well, I know you still have this problem. It goes down toward your abdomen. Why don't we have you see a gastroenterologist? So she sees the gastroenterologist, and so she gets all these tests done. And finally, they do a CAT scan. And, of course, all the tests were negative. And the CAT scan was perfectly negative also, except in her uterus, nothing about her GI problems issue, but in her uterus was a little thing about the size of a dime that the radiologist looked at and said, I think it's a cyst. But just to be sure, you ought to go see a gynecologist. So she goes to see the guy, and now she's anxious, goes to see the gynecologist. The gynecologist says, I think it's just a cyst. But just to be sure, why don't we just take it out? If we can do it as an outpatient, you'll be fizz to fiddle in a couple of days. So, of course, she's anxious before it's done, and that it's not going to be done for about a week. She goes, she has it done, and it gets sent to the pathologist, and the local pathologist looks at it. He's not really sure, so he says, I'm going to send it off to the academic medical center a couple of towns away in the big city, and now this poor lady is going crazy. She must have something awful going on. Well, it came back as perfectly normal, just a cyst. So she says to the gynecologist, I still have this sensation in my chest. And the gynecologist says, well, it sounds like a nerve issue. Why don't we send you to a neurologist? She goes to see the neurologist finally, and the neurologist looks at her, listens to her, and kind of smiles, and he said, in medical school, first year, we learned that nerves run from the spinal cord in the back around the chest between the ribs. We don't have nerves that run up and down. Your problem is not a nerve problem. By now, she's seen how many docs did we just talk about? loads of anxiety, and $18,000, but fortunately for her, most of it was paid for by insurance. But it was all unnecessary. It was all because her physician didn't take the time to talk to her, because that physician felt he didn't have the time.
Right.
So I have a good friend. It's just the way it is, and it's wrong. It shouldn't happen this way. But when the doc has the time, they can take care of these problems.
Right. Right. But a primary care doctor now earns less than a nurse in most cities, most large cities. So
I don't know that that's exactly correct, but it may well be. It may well.
Yeah, when you add the overtime and all that, primary care doctors.
Oh, okay. On an hourly basis, probably right. So medical students, maybe a medical student would like to go to primary care, but they're smart. They look around and they see that you make half as much as the specialist. You have a lot of responsibility. You're going to have to work hard. It probably takes a lot of night call. And you say, hey, I got debts to pay too. I got $200,000 in educational debt. I'm going to become a whatever specialist.
Right.
And so that's what I call this increasing crisis in primary care. Fewer and fewer physician or medical students are going into primary care, and it's all being trivialized, which is a real shame.
And the other thing is that there's really not a program where people are told they have to take care of themselves, but it's really hard if you're living a comfortable lifestyle and you're feeling fairly healthy, and to change your habits. So
you're absolutely right. Lifestyle modifications are very, very important for us, but gosh, they're hard.
So, it's not really until something critical happens that people are willing to give up that sugar or, maybe eat more vegetables or, change their lives. And so so that also makes it hard because we're not put on a program when we're younger to sort of ensure that we'll have a healthy older age. So.
Oh, well, you're right into something. I don't know how much more time we have, but gosh, that's so important that if we have a couple of minutes.
Yeah, of course.
We start to age in our 20s, but we don't notice it. We lose about 1% of all our body functions each year. Oh, that's so small, we just don't notice it. So in your 20s, your 30s, your 40s, you think that everything's great. But in fact, all these systems are slowly but surely declining. So to give you a quick example, slowly but surely, we're losing our balance mechanism. Slowly but surely, we're losing our muscle mass and strength. Slowly but surely, we're losing our bone strength, going on toward osteoporosis. So now you get to be my age, which is 77 years old, and you say, oh my gosh, I'm a little bit out of bounds. I can trip easily. And if I trip, I don't have the muscle mass to catch me the way I used to. And if I hit the ground, oh gosh, my bones are more brittle than they used to be, and I could break a hip. And so that's a real problem. So that's what I mean by we're losing this 1%. We're also losing it in our brains, our cognition. Again, you don't notice it for the first 30, 40 years, but after a while you say, oh gosh, you know what? I can't remember your name. Or where did I put my keys? And those are trivial little things, but it can continue to build up and build up. So what can we do? Well, it turns out you can slow that 1% decline. You can't stop it. We're all going to get to the same place someday. We're going to die. But you can slow that decline. And if you do, not only do these aging processes slow down, but it also will prevent most of the serious chronic diseases that people tend to get as they get older. Things like heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, Alzheimer's disease. So how do you slow it down? It's what you started to talk about before, and it's the basics. I call it the 7 keys to healthy aging. The first one is what we eat, and that does mean eat your veggies for sure, and it does mean cut way back on sugar. We eat a huge amount of sugar as Americans, and it shows. It shows if you look at people walking down the street. There's a lot of big bellies out there. Not that they wanted to be overweight, but they just didn't know that the things they're eating, like the 3 cans of soda a day, and the pizza and the pasta and the pastries and the cake and the cookies, they all add up with really empty calories. So anyway, diet's very important. So it should be heavy into vegetables, fruits, and then healthy oils like olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds, and fish like salmon and mackerel and so on, and just cut way back on the sugar and the white flour. The second thing is exercise. Each of us should get out and walk at least 30 minutes a day. You don't have to jog. You don't have to swim. You don't have to bike ride. You can if you want. That's great. But just simple walking at a brisk pace for half an hour, 6 days a week makes a huge difference. And then you should do some what are called resistance exercises to maintain your muscles. Some weights or something. And the third thing is stress. We're all stressed. We all have low-grade, sometimes high-grade, but we all have at least low-grade chronic stress. And stress is terrible for us. It fans the flames of inflammation. That's where the term inflammation comes from, and that's the root cause of all chronic diseases. So we've got to take care of our stresses. Things like meditation, yoga, even exercise and diet again. Lots of things we can do. And sometimes just stopping and taking a few deep breaths will make a big difference. Anyway, so the next one is we got to get enough sleep. Most Americans get too little sleep. We all need about 7.5 hours. And I think most people get more like 6 and say, oh, it's okay. And we're kind of almost told, oh, you should be able to get by on less than that. But it's not true. We really need sleep. It's absolutely critical to our health. There's so many things that occur during sleep, but just call it restoration of body functions. So that's very important. Of course, nobody should smoke and shouldn't abuse any drugs. And then all those are for all of our body, but our brains need 2 more things. We got to challenge our brain all the time. And just like those muscle resistance exercises, we need to give the brain a little resistance exercise. And so something that's challenging. And watching TV is not a challenge. Reading a book is not a challenge. But doing something artistic, a musical instrument, dance, all these things that challenge us is really fantastically good for our brain. And then the last of the 7 is social engagement. We humans need to interact with other humans. Can't be hermits. It's just very, very important. So I would say make friends and keep friends, and in all sorts of ways. So I know I rattled on a lot of stuff awfully fast there, but if you do that, you really can slow the aging process, and you really can prevent these terrible diseases.
Well, I would love to have you back to discuss the 7 things that you can do in a lot more detail. And I was wondering if people wanted to reach out and learn more about that and about how they can work better in the medical system. I know you've written some books, and how would they reach out to you? What's the best way for them to get this information from you?
Well, I have a website which is under reconstruction right now. It'll probably be ready in another couple of days. But I'll give you the URL. It's Medical Megatrends, all one word, of course, medicalmegatrends.com. Right now, if you try it, you won't get anything. But in a couple more days, you will. Do this. Go to Amazon, write in 7 Keys to Healthy Aging. And you'll get that book will come up, but it will also take you to my other books, including the primary care book.
So, Dr. Schimpff, I really appreciate you coming on the show. I'm hoping to have you back again. This is Minda Wilson with Urgent Care.